Hello, my science friends. I did want to take some time and just share what I had learned about the new science standards at their full day training in February. I will give you a copy of this presentation because I've altered it a little bit. If you would like to see the original presentation, it is here. Please also know that some of this information is subject to change in response to remote learning. I know that Curriculum and Instruction was originally planning on releasing Bridge to Curriculum documents in March or April, and now that's been pushed a little bit to after the 1st of May, and they're considering changes to next year's documents based on needs that might arise this year. So all of that to say, this is what we know at this time, and as we get more information, I will share that with you. So today's big goals are just to explore the overall structure of the 2020 academic standards for science. So I'll share what I do know about what you'll see in Bridge to Curriculum, and then the implications for CMAS testing for that. And then I'll share a little bit about the task that they shared with us so that you can see an example of the shifts that NGSS asks of science instruction. So as we walk through some of the expected shifts in both standards, but also instruction, it's helpful to also remember that as science teachers, we're doing a lot of this already in our classroom. And so they gave us some graphic organizers around current state and desired state, and they're linked in the notes section of the presentation. And they used Rocketbook, so they are note catchers that you can then scan and take pictures of, so it's also a cool tool to use with students. But as you think about your classroom, what do you and students already do around thinking as scientists and acting and doing like scientists and feeling like scientists? And then what changes might you see as you walk through this presentation? So take a minute and jot those down if you so desire. All Colorado standards for all content areas underwent a review and revision process. And so Colorado academic standards are updated for all content areas in 2020. So you can go to the CDE 2020 standards page and look at that. In science, they adopted the NGSS standards for Colorado, with the exception of some of the engineering standards because of a guarantee of equity across all districts in Colorado. So when Colorado adopted the science standards, you will see that they have adopted them through middle school. So you can navigate to that. And then they left it up to individual districts how to decide on a scope and sequence that makes the most sense within that district. When you expand on one of the GLEs, you may notice that the language is exactly the same, although Colorado's numbering of that may be different. But in parentheses, they've referred to the NGSS notation so that you can still cross-reference those pieces. Like I said, you'll still see that the major content pieces as well as the cross-cutting concepts from NGSS. So when we think about the timeline for the shifts, this past year, 2019-2020, Jeffco implemented new standards and new units for 6th grade. 8th graders took the 2009 CMAS, or the CMAS that was aligned to 2009 standards. This next year, 7th grade will have new standards and new units. 8th grade standards will be updated, although they will keep the same units that they have had. 8th graders will take the 2009 CMAS. In 2021-22, new standards will be rolled out with new units for 8th grade. And that year, students will take the 2020 CMAS for science, which is now going to be a 6-8 test on all of those middle school standards. And that year will be a benchmark year, so it will be hold harmless for accountability reasons, but they will also use that test to determine cutoff scores and valid and reliable test questions. And then the following year, 2022 to 23, All 3 grade levels will have fully implemented the NGSS standards, and 8th graders will take the 2020 CMAS and receive scores. Next, curriculum and instruction considered how best to lay out those middle school units then for our district. So some of the design constraints from the Board of Education and Colorado were that 7th grade would still continue with the unit at the end of the year around health and decision making. And so whichever unit in life science was connected to the human body standards made the most sense to go to 7th grade. Additionally, each grade level needed to have all 3 domains of earth and space science, life science, and physical science each year. And finally, because we know our 6th graders go to outdoor lab, they wanted to place the most appropriate standards for 6th grade outdoor lab in 6th grade. So in that decision making, ecology makes the most sense in 6th grade because of outdoor lab. And then 7th grade, human body, along with that health and decision making, would stay in 7th grade. And so that left evolution as the only life science strand for 8th grade. And if students were going to study evolution, then it makes sense for 8th grade to also study the fossil record with that, because those 2 units blend so well. Then, as they were trying to build cohesive science stories, when they look at that 6th grade ecology piece, starting with matter response to energy and understanding the relationships and phenomena that students can observe in ecology, it also makes sense to attach weather and climate into 6th grade. So that 6th grade story kind of makes sense. And again, knowing that each grade level needed to have a strand from each domain, that leaves space at 7th grade. And again, when we think about space, the thing that makes the most sense is to also study force and motion so that you understand those relationships between planetary bodies. And so then that leaves the physical science strand for 8th grade to be waves. So they did try to build a cohesive story. What does that look like in the CAP documents? In the notes section, you will see links to the drafts of those CAP documents for each year. Before diving into the updated standards and CAP document, it's helpful to understand some of the dimensions of the NGSS standards. So there's 3 main dimensions. There are the disciplinary core ideas, sometimes abbreviated DCI, and those are the science content standards. And so we're pretty familiar with those. We have those in our Colorado state standards. And our state standards continue to be organized by these standards. And you'll see them in the 3 domains of physical, life, and earth and space science. Then we also have the science and engineering practices. And so those are what students do in order to learn science and do the work of scientists as they are learning. And then finally, there are cross-cutting concepts, which are sometimes abbreviated CCI, and those are big ideas and places where students can connect ideas across some of those disciplines. So when they wrote the NGSS standards, they wrote them through performance expectations so that there was a measurable outcome. And you'll see these embedded within the Colorado standards, but each of those performance expectations has the science and engineering practices, the cross-cutting concepts, and the disciplinary core ideas within them. So again, when you look at the Colorado state standards, you will see the grade level expectation. That is the disciplinary core idea within the strand. But then when you look at the evidence outcomes, they match the performance outcomes that are written into the NGSS. And so you'll see pieces that are the science and engineering practices, such as develop models or analyze and interpret data, as well as some of those cross-cutting concepts when we talk about structure-function relationships or other big ideas. NSTA has an NGSS hub where you can look at the standards, and if you scroll down to middle school, What's helpful is you can click on any of those performance outcomes and you'll see the labels here. So when you're cross-referencing within Jeffco or Colorado State Standards, that will be the documentation that's helpful. But when you click on that, it will highlight down below which of those 3D pieces are embedded within that performance expectation. And then you can also go down below and there are resources that are vetted as well as shared that are aligned to those performance expectations. So when we look at the draft of the CAP documents, you will see the 2009 or previous kind of CAP documents. And then if you scroll down, you will see the new standards. Now they're laid out by domain, but if you look closely, you can see when those might take place. And if you click on any hyperlinks, Jackie Adkins has provided additional information around that state standard. So again, those links are embedded on the notes section of this slide. So the hope is with the shift in standards is that science instruction also shifts to students doing science in order to learn about science. So pause the video for a moment in order to watch the video that's embedded on this slide so that you can see some of the shifts that are expected. Another resource is a look at two science teachers' classroom, Mr. Coles and Miss Rivera, and you can click on the link in the notes and take a look at how they embed the cross-cutting concepts, the science engineering practice, and the disciplinary core ideas within their approach to science. So within that link, you'll see Mr. Cole's approach and Ms. Rivera's approach to the same unit and how they embed those different aspects of the NGSS 3D standards within that. And finally, a third resource that helps capture the shift in instruction is this book, 5 Practices for Orchestrating Productive Task-Based Conversations in Science. And I do have a copy of the book for Deer Creek, but again, in the notes section, there are some pages to read to kind of look at how teachers might provide those high-level cognitive tasks for students and help them walk through that. And it is very much aligned to the Jeffco Deeper Learning Model. So as you begin planning for next year, there are some resources embedded in Bridge to Curriculum to help. So for any plan, when you navigate to the resources page or as new CAP documents are released, there are learning chunks that have some helpful information, as well as if teachers have come together to create lesson plans. So this year, 6th grade will have some of those. And then the hope is that there will be focus groups that are able to meet and you can participate in those next year if you're a 7th grade teacher, to work on developing unit plans that are aligned to the NGSS standards. So when you take a look at the learning chunks, they will have the standards on cards, which I think are helpful to kind of group them together and figure out how do I want to bundle some of this unit. But then you've got essential questions and some of the pieces around the science and engineering practices. But there's also resources for background information and phenomena and misconceptions that you can use to kind of dig deeper into some of those pieces. And then also looking at potential lessons and or labs. One of the things that curriculum and instruction is hoping is that ABI will become part of what the district can offer as training, because it does align really well to NGSS standards. And again, they're hoping to support and offer teacher work groups in order to work through and understand the new standards, but then also develop resources that can be shared. So this is an example of that 5E model. And when you click on link for lesson plans, you can see that teachers in Jeffco have started this process and kind of shared through the 5E model some potential ways to address the standards within this unit. And then a final resource is through the NGSS hub at NSTA. And again, when you scroll down underneath the standards, there are some possibilities for unit and lesson plans as well that have been vetted through NSTA or